There are 4 options for tunneling protocols when we configure our VPN server. The easiest way to think of tunneling: if I have a user that's in Rio and I have a headquarters location in Ireland, and that's where my VPN server is. My user in Rio, they have a VPN client on their computer and they've just traveled to Rio for the week. I need this user to have a secure connection through the internet back to this VPN server, which then allows them to access file servers, apps, all the resources inside the network. The tunnel protocols we have. The oldest is point-to-point tunneling protocol, PPTP. This is supported in Windows 2000, or we should say was supported in Windows 2000. That just lets you know how old it actually is. It uses TCP port 1723. Now this does encrypt traffic. What it does not do what we call integrity, meaning it does not take your message before you send it and run it through an algorithm that would help verify if it changed in transit. What many newer protocols do, before you send a message, they run it through a mathematical algorithm. They take the result that it actually derived from that algorithm and it gets associated with the message and it's sent through the internet. When it gets to the destination machine, it gets ran through the same algorithm, generates an answer. Then it compares the answer to see if that's the same answer that was generated before the message was sent. If the message has not been modified in transit, answer would be exactly the same. Now they'll call that answer a key. But if it has changed in any way, a single thing about this message may have changed, it now knows it failed this integrity check and something about the message changed, so we would just discard that message. PPTP does not do that part. It just encrypts traffic, but does no integrity checking. It's older than the ability to really do that. The other common protocol we have is Layer 2 tunneling protocol over IPsec. This was the standard for many years. You just needed to run Windows XP. Now this uses a few ports. It used UDP port 500 and UDP port 4500. These 2 ports are actually for IPsec. Now IPsec is just short for IP security. It is what encrypts the connection itself, the IPsec protocol. And IPsec is actually its own self-sustained protocol. The Layer 2 tunneling protocol, which is really mainly for like session management, uses port 1701 is the L2TP part of that. Now, you don't really need to know the port numbers necessarily. The only time that would be important, if there is a firewall that sits in front of the VPN server that separates it from the internet, which is pretty common, and your VPN server would be in your perimeter network, you would just have to make sure you allow ports 500, 4500, and 1701. So that would really be the significance of that. Just making sure it can pass through any edge firewalls so you can connect to the VPN server. Now, one of the least common, or actually from this list, one that it just has never been very common, SSTP. You had to run Vista or newer for this, and it stands for Secure Socket Tunneling Protocol. This is Microsoft's version of SSL for a VPN. Now, in the real world, I call it, many companies used and still use SSL for their VPN. SSL is actually owned by Netscape, and SSL for some uses actually requires licensing. Now, everyone associates SSL with websites, but it can do many more things than just secure web pages. Some of those other things do require licensing. And for whatever reason, Microsoft and Netscape could not come to a licensing agreement for Microsoft to use this as a VPN protocol. Now, other vendors, Cisco, SonicWall, Checkpoint, Juniper, all support traditional SSL VPNs. VPN server level, they could not reach an agreement. So what Microsoft did, they created their own version of SSL and named it SSTP. Like SSL, it does use port 443. So if you do have a firewall that this sits in front of, so let's say that's my firewall, and this is my VPN server. And then we have another firewall here. I'm just going to call this the back firewall, and we'll call this one the front. And this one is the one actually connected to the internet. Then I have my LAN. So that's where you have your domain controllers and all your file servers, application servers, and clients. Well, this front firewall is directly internet accessible. So with this, if I use SSTP, the only port in the firewall that I have to allow is port 443, so you can connect to the VPN server. If I were to use L2TP, you had to open 500, 4500, 1701. Many people preferred SSL, and one of the primary reasons was because it used port 443, which is normally already open. The other protocol, the newest, required Windows 7 or newer, is IKE version 2. Now, IKE stands for Internet Key Exchange. It uses UDP port 500. Notice that is the same port that we used here. The reason, IKE is actually part of the IPsec protocol. Now, what's unique about IKE, it has a special capability called VPN Reconnect. What IKE does that the other protocols do not. If your VPN is disrupted for lack of network connectivity, IKE will automatically reconnect your VPN client. This became a problem when users started using some form of hotspots. Like you have a hotspot on your phone. You may have like one of these MiFi devices that you connect to that ultimately you connect through a cell tower ultimately, and you access resources. Many of those types of devices have huge fluctuations in bandwidth, and they would also have these brief momentary drops where if you were surfing the internet, you would not really notice. But if you need a persistent connection like a VPN that has to be connected nonstop, it would drop your VPN. So for some users, they ended up every few minutes, they had to reconnect the VPN. What IKE does is seamlessly reconnects the VPN. Now, we do have to enable that VPN reconnect feature, which they call mobility in the interface. But it is just less disruptive to the user. But those would be the four options: PPTP, L2TP, SSTP, IKE v2 for our tunnel protocols. Whichever of these you choose, the end result is ultimately still just this secure connection over the internet between your client here and your VPN server, just 4 choices for your protocol that actually does it.